Hey, following up on last video where I talked about the overall state of MLB attendance and concluded that it's in a good place, despite the numbers being down a little bit this year. Today I'd like to talk about each individual team's attendance, where they are now, and where they can reasonably expect to be by the end of the season. Expectations are not the same for all teams. Some teams can get over 40,000 fans per game, even when the team's not looking so good. Others can only expect 25 to 30 in a good year. A lot of it depends on how well the team's doing. If a team goes from making the postseason with 30,000 average attendance to a last place finish and only 17,000 average attendance, they don't have an attendance problem, they have a performance problem. We're already about a month into the season, so we've got the early attendance figures to give us an idea of what we can expect to see by the time the season's over. The figures are always at their lowest in April when it's still cold in a lot of places. Then the weather warms up, schools let out for summer vacation, and between the 1st of May and the 1st of October, attendance grows between 5 to 20% for most teams. We'll start by looking at the teams with the lowest attendance so far in 2024, and then work our way up to the attendance leaders. You probably have a pretty good idea which team we'll be ending the video with, and you know for certain which team we're starting with. The Oakland A's have, by far, the lowest attendance at just over 6,000, less than half that of the team with the next lowest attendance, and down more than 4,000 from last year. You know the reason why, we don't need to go over it again. Can they expect to break five-figure attendance for the season? No. The fans are pissed, and they're not going to just forget about it. That being said, I'd expect a little rise in the summer months, just like every other team gets, and a further rise from people wanting to catch one last A's game in Oakland, and a big crowd for the final game. But I'd say 8,000 is the best they can hope for, and that may be hoping for too much. Worst attendance for a team not relocating at the end of this season belongs to the Miami Marlins, at just over 14,000. That's actually up from this time a year ago, an increase of about 1,000. Their attendance right now is almost the same as it was at the end of 2023. Going by that alone, you might expect to see 16,000 by the end of the year, but this team has been looking really bad. They should be thrilled if they end the season at over 15,000, but should be content with matching last year's mark of 14,356. About 100 more than what they've got at the moment. The other Florida team isn't doing much better. The Rays are averaging 15,546, down 1,400 from a year ago at this point, even though they're coming off a good season and don't look too bad so far this year. But this is the Rays we're talking about here. Wins don't translate to ticket sales. This team did not see a surge in attendance over the summer months last year. What they had in late April was about what they ended the season with. So you would expect them to end the season at 15,000 per game, like they have now. The best the Rays can hope for is that there is an increase in later months, pushing average attendance over 16,000. It'll fall short of last year's mark of 17,781, but at least it'll be better than 2022, when it was under 14,000. Chicago White Sox. Unlike the last three, this is not a team that's always this far down the list. It's just that they're coming off a really bad year, even worse this year, and not much hope for the near future. On the bright side, though, they're only down around 600 fans per game. At this point last year, they were at 16,700 and finished the season at 20,613, an increase of 23%. Weather is important in Chicago. They always see a big rise in attendance as the weather warms up. So they're down 600 per game now. If they finish the season down 600, that'll put them at just over the 20,000 mark. That's the best they can possibly hope for. But realistically, they shouldn't be surprised if it's 18 or 19,000. Detroit Tigers. Like Chicago, Detroit is a place where weather really matters. Last year, attendance rose from just over 16,000 at this point to 19,912 at the end of the season. And unlike the Sox, the Tigers have gained 600 fans per game up to this point. So 20,000 seems like a sure thing, maybe more depending on the team's performance. Right now, they're not looking too bad. If they stay in the postseason race till the end, 22,000 would be a good number for them. Kansas City Royals up a modest 500 fans per game right now, matching the team's optimism. They lost over 100 games last year. Now they've got a winning record. Attendance ticked up a little in the months after April last year, but not much. I'd blame the product on the field for that. If they keep winning, they can expect a larger increase this summer. Last year's final average was 16,136. This year I'd say 17,000 for sure, even if the winning doesn't continue. If the team looks good all summer, they should get over 18,000, which they haven't done since 2019. Minnesota Twins down about 400 per game from a year ago. Last year at this point they were just over 20,000, then saw a gain of more than 20% from May to September. Weather is important for an outdoor park in Minnesota. A similar mid-season gain this year is very likely. That is, if a poor showing by the team doesn't scare the fans away. They were a first-place team a year ago, but are off to a rough start this year. Regardless of how the team does, I think matching last year's average of 24,372, little more or a little less, is to be expected. Pittsburgh Pirates up 2,700 per game from this point last year. 18,300 per game, and that's April in Pittsburgh. It'll surely get over 20,000 for the year. Last year at this time it was a little over 16,000, and was over 20,000 by the end of the season. That was a team that finished 10 games under 500. They're off to a decent start this year. The way things are going, expectations should be 23,000. Cleveland Guardians are at 20,500, a rise of 4,000 fans per game. Seeing a trend here, cold weather cities, bottom third of MLB in attendance, but they're mostly up from this time last year. Cleveland is known for poor attendance in April. In 2023, they went from a little over 17,000 in late April to 22,643 at the end of the season. This year already at 21,000 and off to a really good start. They have a team that could win the AL Central, and if they do that, attendance could easily top 25,000. New York Mets, another cold weather city, but this one is seeing a lot more vacant seats. At 21,500, it's down more than 6,000 per game from this time a year ago. Big difference is they were coming off a 100-win season in 2022. They're coming off a losing season in 2023. Last year's attendance was around 23,000 in late April. That rose to 31,772 at the end of the season. The team is looking okay so far. Expect a mid-season warm weather increase in attendance, but it won't get them caught up to last year's figures. Probably 25,000. Baltimore Orioles, 22,000 per game right now, up 2,000 from last April. At that time, their attendance was just over 20,000. They finished at 23,911. This increase was expected. They're coming off an AL East championship season, and so far are leading the way once again. This team had so many losing seasons in the recent past. Good to see the fans slowly returning. If they keep it up, I think they can get over 30,000 next year. As for this year, 27,000 seems like a good number to expect. Cincinnati Reds, 21,600, up 5,700 from a year ago. Last year in April, they were coming off a last-place finish and only drew 16,000 per game. They ended the season just over 500, and attendance rose to over 25,000, about a 50% increase. That's what winning will do. I wouldn't expect that large of an increase this year. They'll almost definitely top last year's mark of 25,164. Could reach 26 or 27. Depends on how the team's doing. Washington Nationals just over 25,000 right now, up almost 4,000 per game from this time last year. The team went from 21,000 in April to 23,035 at season's end. Just a small increase. That's what happens when the team's no good. Don't know the reason for the increase so far this year, but as we saw last year, even a really bad Nationals team will get a warm weather bump in attendance. Since they're at 24,600 now, anticipating just a little rise in attendance, we'll put the number at 26,000. Colorado Rockies, 25,000 right now, down 2,000 from 1 year ago. They were at 27,300 at the time, brought it all the way up to 32,000 at the end of the season. This team has consistently been drawing over 30,000 per game every year, despite so many losing seasons. Looks like it could end this year, but attendance went up about 5,000 per game from April to the end of the season last year. If it does the same this year, it'll cross the 30,000 mark once again, so they can reasonably hope for 30,000. But shouldn't be surprised if it's 29. Milwaukee Brewers, 25,800 right now, down 3,600 per game from this time last year. Don't know why. They won their division last year and are leading the way so far this year. Attendance last year increased 2,000 per game from late April to the end of the season. Final number was 31,498. They would need quite a surge to get over 30,000 by the end of September. Could happen if the team keeps winning, but I'd say 28,000 is more likely. Seattle Mariners, 27,300 right now, a rise of only a couple hundred from this time last year. They saw a big increase after April last year, ending the year at 33,215. That will be hard to repeat, but attendance has been rising a lot in Seattle in recent years, as the team's been winning more. Expect 32 or 33,000 at the end of this season. LA Angels just a hair under 30,000 at the moment, down 5,000 from this time last year. No doubt they're feeling the loss of Shohei Ohtani. But still, just under 30,000 is pretty good for a team losing its star player and putting a bad team on the field year after year. 2023's final average attendance was 32,600. They did not see an increase from late April to the end of the season. It actually went down during that time. They'll be lucky if they can get to 30,000 this year. 29,000 is a more realistic number. Toronto Blue Jays 30,500 at this time, a loss of 3,800 per game from this time last year. Last year's attendance in Toronto went from 34,300 at this time to 37,307 at the end of the season. The team was good last year, could be again this year, but something's keeping the fans away early in the season, and they won't be able to recover from it. They'll bring in more fans in the coming months and end the season somewhere over 32,000, equaling their 2022 mark. Boston Red Sox 30,900, a little drop from a year ago, down about 800 per game. They ended 2023 with 32,989. They also finished in last place again. If they have a good season, expect attendance figures to turn positive year over year and get over 33,000. If the results on the field don't change, 32,000 once again, down just hundreds from last year. San Francisco Giants 31,000, up 1,000 from this time last year. They only got a tiny bump in attendance after April of last year, ending the season at 30,866, as the team finished with a losing record. Not looking too good so far this year, but that early season optimism has their attendance in positive territory. From here on out, it'll take just a slight increase to get it over 32,000, which is probably where they'll end up. Arizona Diamondbacks 31,700, up more than 10,000 per game from this time last year, and we all know why. But unlike other teams, April might actually be their best month, riding off the energy from last October. That'll wear off, especially if the team doesn't live up to last year's standard. But if it holds steady at 31 or even drops to 30, they'll be happy with it. A big increase from last year's final average attendance of 24,212. Texas Rangers, yes, we get the two World Series teams back-to-back. 31,700, up 8,000 from this time last year. They ended last season at 31,272. The fans really started pouring in as the season went on. Expect a more modest increase this year. 35,000 seems about right. Chicago Cubs 33,800, up 2,900 from this time last year. This is another cold weather team that gets a nice boost as the season goes on. And right now they're coming off a winning season and have every reason to believe this year will be even better. After April of last year, they raised attendance by more than 3,000 by the end of the season, ending at 34,261. If they do the same this year, it'll be 37,000, and that's what they should expect. Houston Astros 35,043, down 2,200 from this time last year, following a year in which they didn't reach the World Series, and they're off to a bad start right now. Last year's final attendance was 37,683. Little change from late April to the end of September, and probably the same this year. Whatever attendance they have now is what they'll end up with, and that is 35,000. St. Louis Cardinals 37,300, down almost 3,000. A year ago in late April they were averaging over 40,000, still ended the season at 40,013, but that was a little down from the start of the season, as the team finished in last place. Not looking good this year either. 40,000 is out of the question. Won't be surprised if it holds at 37 the rest of the season. If the team starts doing a little better, they may get a summertime boost to bring it over 38. Atlanta Braves 37,400, a very small decrease, down only 100 from this time last year. A team that's always winning lately and always attracting large crowds. They got a very small boost in the summer months last year. Can expect another one this year. Could turn positive year over year, or maybe not. Last year's final average attendance was 39,401. That's about what they'll probably get this year. Philadelphia Phillies 38,053, a drop of about 1,500 per game. Last year at this time they were averaging 39,500, but ended the year at 37,686. Last April's high attendance was due to them coming off a World Series appearance in 2022. So it's not really fair to compare this April to last April. If it goes in the other direction and they see a rise in attendance in the next few months, like most teams see, they'll end the season at somewhere over 38 or possibly 39. San Diego Padres 38,442, down only about 400 from this time last year. They ended last season at 40,390, even though it was kind of a disappointing season. Hard telling how this season's going to turn out, but if it's over 38 now, 40,000 by fall seems about right. New York Yankees 38,164, down about 1,200 from this time last year. End of the season last year was 40,358, and that was in a disappointing season. Off to a good start right now. More wins can mean more fans. I could see the Yankees drawing over 42. If they disappoint again, they can still get over 40,000, matching last year's final average attendance. LA Dodgers, highest attendance in Major League Baseball, always winning in recent years, always attracting the largest crowds, and last offseason they signed MLB's biggest superstar. Yet attendance is down almost 3,000 per game, currently sitting at 45,658. No warm weather boost in LA, of course. Last year attendance dropped by more than 1,000 from late April to the end of the season. Final number was 47,371. Highly unlikely they can overcome this early season drop and beat last year's figures, but maybe a little boost as the season goes on, ending the year at 46,000. At this moment, 13 teams are up, 17 are down when compared with attendance at this time last year. Overall, MLB attendance is up 152 per game, compared to where they were at after 356 games in 2023. As for the expected figures I gave here today, let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree. We'll find out at the end of the season if I was right or wrong. Anyway, that's all for this one. Until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya!